Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, tonight, wherever it is where you're from. I have the absolute incredible pleasure, oh, sorry for my dog's nose there. I have the absolute incredible pleasure of introducing Carlos, who is our RA for the Americas. Incredible speaker, passionate advocate, absolutely amazing, and he's really been kind of the driving force behind this campaign so far. And this is Nash stealing my camera. So I'm very happy to introduce him to provide the session on intersectionality. I want to remind everybody to please, if you have questions during the presentation, please post them if you're joining us via Google Hangouts in the questions tab at the side, or on YouTube via the comments below. So without any further ado, I'll pass it over to Carlos, and we'll get started.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys are being able to hear me, but hi everybody. My name is Carlos Acosta, and I am currently regional assistant for the Americas in SCORA this year. I am so happy to be here and to explain to you a little bit more about what intersectionality is and why is it important to discuss this with everyone. My hair is super crazy, but we're it's typical medical school day. So I decided to name this session a little bit differently. It's called Who Likes Gay Patterns? And we're going to have an insight on intersectionality in the LGBT world. Okay, so um, buenas noches a todos. Mi nombre es Carlos y soy el asistente regional para SCORA en las Américas. Sé que hay mucha gente viendo en español, entonces hemos decidido llamar esta sesión ¿Quién le gustan los padrones gays? Y por qué, digamos, la interseccionalidad es diferente. ¿Por qué tiene que ser diferente? Okay. So we're going to start. I'm going to be translating because there's a lot of people in the Americas that have better understanding in Spanish. So in order to be comprehensive, and we want everyone to have a great session, I'm going to be translating into both languages. Entonces voy a estar haciendo traducciones. Es básicamente eso. So what is intersectionality? Intersectionality is basically, yes, you can go next. That all oppression is connected. So we have lots of aspects of our lives that are connected to each other in various ways. Like in just by the simple fact of existing, we'll have various characteristics of ourselves that will relate to each other. Entonces, la interseccionalidad es simplemente la comunicación que existe entre las características que tenemos en nuestra vida, en nuestro cuerpo, en las acciones que hacemos en el día a día. Y vamos a comenzar con este primer término. So we're going to start with this first term. Okay, thank you, Jenna. So it is really difficult to speak about intersectionality within the LGBT movement. And we have various reasons why this is such a sensitive topic. In many ways, many people think that speaking and raising the voice for intersectionality is a way of breaking up the movement, which we will see is totally false. Also, because we see a tendency that in Brazil we like to call the GGGGG movement. But it's not the way it's not a proper, how do I say, like a specific definition. When we say GGGGGG is because it's a critique, in that somehow the LGBT movement has been stronger in the last years, speaking about gay men and only about gay men, forgetting about the other parts of the acronym, the other things that we can explore, in sexuality and gender identity. And also because of beauty patterns, because of the conservation of things that we identify with. So many, for example, many people believe that being gay needs to follow a certain stereotype, and this is something that some people we will see further to defend, I don't know how to say this, to keep. So intersectionality definitely breaks those beauty patterns or those social patterns that we think are acceptable. So we have diverse characteristics that may define you, and that are, for example, having different social orientations, gender identity, social classes, your physique being, I don't know, having curly hair or straight hair, your race, of course, if it's very different if you're white, if you're black, if you're indigenous, if you're from an Asian culture, for example. Now I'm translating. Entonces estoy hablando de las razones por las cuales es muy diferente y difícil hablar sobre el movimiento LGBT, principalmente en las Américas. Y las tres razones que cité son, primero, porque hay mucha gente que piensa que puede quebrar el movimiento, digamos, en muchas fracciones más pequeñas, lo cual es mentira y lo vamos a ver después. La implementación del movimiento jejeje no existe, es algo que se dice coloquialmente, pues me gusta expresarlo de esta manera, pero es básicamente discutir por qué el movimiento LGBT se ha centrado solo en la discusión de los hombres gays, dejando atrás al resto de las letras, digamos, al resto de las otras diversidades de género que tenemos. Y lo último es porque mueve y modifica nuestros padrones de belleza. Y la razón por la cual modifica eso es porque lo vamos a ver también un poco más aprofundado después, pero principalmente porque esos padrones de belleza se basan en normatividades y hablar sobre interseccionalidad definitivamente quiebra esas normatividades. Entonces, para la gente que sigue y pues que le gusta la normatividad, pues obviamente no va a ser una charla chévere. Entonces nos definimos por diferentes características, además de sexualidad e identidad de género, como lo son nuestra clase social, nuestro físico, nuestra raza, nuestra identidad. Okay, Jenna, we are good to go. So we have to acknowledge our own stigma. And our own stigma, I don't mean it like personal. I mean it like in terms of the stigma that exists within the LGBTQ plus population. And we can also be normative being an LGBT person. And everybody would say like, what? Like, how come this be? You know, like in theory, you're a social minority and you have not even like a chance of being normative. Well, this is not actually the case. We're going to see a little bit further why. But I don't know if you guys have seen that actually we have like also like a social pyramid within the LGBTQ plus population, and this social pyramid, like internally the LGBT population, has to do with intersectionality, has to do with all of the things and all of the stigmas that we also speak about outside the LGBT population, like for example being a woman, for example being a different race, for example being from a certain age, for example being fat or being thin. um so, in this order of ideas, we see that in the movement, sometimes and in some situations, G oppresses L. I mean, gays oppress lesbians in some cases, and the lesbians therefore will oppress bisexuals, transgender. So, in the end, the transgender population, like, and also the non-binary, queer-gendered, pansexual, you know, like all of these new types of sexuality and gender identities that we do not understand still, will be oppressed by the whole LGBT population, which is something very problematic because that is actually what is breaking up the movement and not necessarily identifying the differences between each other. I'm going to like I don't know how to say it, go deeper in this as like along the presentation. Entonces, de lo que hablé es que necesitamos reconocer nuestro propio estigma como comunidad LGBT, porque también podemos ser normativos. Por más de que seamos pertenecientes, digamos, a una minoría social, también podemos reproducir estigma. En este caso, por otras circunstancias, que ya en nuestro caso tal vez no sean sexualidades y orientaciones de género, pero sí otros factores, como por ejemplo el hecho de ser mujer, el hecho de ser negro, el hecho de pertenecer a una, o digamos, identificarse con un género que no ha sido definido. Entonces, en estos casos, vemos que muchas veces el gay oprime a la lesbiana y la lesbiana al bisexual y el bisexual a la o el transgénero. Em, y eso se ve muy repetido dentro del movimiento LGBT. ¿Ok? So I wanted to bring this. This is actually like a socio-demographic um now I'm forgetting English. Investigation, yes. That like interviewed a lot of people in the streets, and the question was like, what does the word gay mean to you? And the most shocking fact, or let's say characteristics, that we had in this investigation was that if you see the numbers like around the phrases, are the number of people who responded that that phrase or something similar. And so, for example, let's start like from the lowest number to the upperst number. So, flamboyancy, they're walking around with tight jeans on, switching, head moving all around, nails painted, toes all done up. Actually, he's white. So, starting by the stereotyping, of gay life, nails painted, for example, tight jeans on. These are things that people like have stereotyped to a gay person, for example. And the one that got the most like comments was white dudes embracing in a public space. So why, first of all, like, how do we know that they are like consider how do they know they consider themselves dude? It's incredible to see that people actually like state that they are white, like almost if it was like a thing that will never happen to black people or indigenous people or other types, of social communities. So it's definitely a very interesting debate that we need to start questioning ourselves. Like why people understand gay as something referred to as jeans, tight jeans, as nails painted, as toes done up, like, and also in this case being white. That's very interesting to understand. Um, Ok, entonces en esta diapositiva lo que quería hablar es pues de una investigación que se realizó en el 2009 que le preguntaba a la población en general qué significaba la palabra gay. Y entonces muchas respuestas fueron resumidas en gente blanca, o por ejemplo tipos, hombres blancos, abrazándose en un espacio público. Esa fue la respuesta, digamos, más comentada. Y entonces demuestra mucho cómo nosotros estereotipamos lo que significa gay, estereotipamos lo que significa identidad de género, y lo hacemos o masculino, femenino, o blanco, o negro, excluyendo otras posibilidades y que otras personas puedan ser así. Esto aumenta nuestro estigma y o nuestra posibilidad de discriminar a los otros. Okay? So, I brought some examples. Por motivos de tiempo, los ejemplos los podemos discutir después en español. So I was just saying that for lack of time, I'm just going to explain these in English. So examples of representation, for example, where transgender roles are being done by cisgender people, homosexual or not, they're just being done by cisgender people. This is not, I mean, it is not a crime, as I was saying, but it is definitely something we need to discuss in terms of, if there are transgender actors out there, why aren't they representing their own population in movies, in current, like, I don't know, in series and other types of things? And as well, other types of roles outside gay and lesbian characters, because now we have like bisexual people, transgender people, pansexual people, asexual people. Why don't we why are we not seeing these characters in TV, in magazines, in interviews? This is also like a type of intersectional differences within the LGBT community, and also in violence. Who suffers more aggression between a white cisgender man and a black, excuse me, and an indigenous gay cisgender man? Uh, well, if your response was the indigenous gay cisgender man, yes, you're right. And the reason why is this is not because they are gay, but because one is white and the other one is not. So we're going to like enter into like a deeper example further on. I'm going to. Okay, so the problem is not of the normative gays. Like, if you're a normative gay or like a normative person, is not a problem. The problem is a collective issue. It's a social problem. It is something of the social determinants that we find in society that makes people in a certain system have benefits or not. So nobody is guilty, let's say, of having differences, or nobody was like is guilty of being white or being black or being, I don't know, like the problem is that those people that may benefit of that tend to reproduce like those same values that maintain them in the top of the social pyramid for own benefit, and this is what like really represents a problem. When people are conscious about this process and about this benefit, and they actually stay there and want to reproduce because they want to maintain those privileges and not actually letting other people get them as well. Entonces lo que está diciendo es que el problema no es ser un gay normativo, no es ser una persona que, pues, que haya nacido blanca o que haya nacido con privilegios, sino es aquella persona que igual teniendo sus privilegios o igual teniendo esa ventaja social, no reconoce la colectividad de este asunto. Quiere decir que estamos luchando en realidad es por un sistema, no estamos luchando en realidad, digamos, por nuestras diferencias, sino es cuando alguien tiene sus beneficios y reproduce esos valores que lo mantienen en esa posición para mantener los beneficios, ahí tenemos un problema, ahí tenemos una discusión, un rompimiento del tejido social que no nos permite luchar contra la desigualdad. So not all gay people suffer homophobia in the same way. This is like the first message that we have. And why do we have this? It's called, like, the phenomenon is called the social reading. So not all people suffer homophobia in the same way, because the far the farther, I don't know how to say this, like the farthest away you stand from that status quo, like you have to be in, the higher the chances you have of suffering greater consequences for expressing those differences and or even like being them, which means the following. For example, I gave two examples there: the girly gaze versus the macho gaze. So this is something that we have like discussed a lot, for example, in terms of who suffers, for example, who has a greater tendency to suffer homophobia. Is it the gay guy who is very, 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 let's say, who has pink nails and who listens to Madonna and that is loud and that delivers glitter in the classroom or whatever? Or the macho gay that watches like American football, and goes to the gym, and it's more like to that stereotype of heteronormativity we have. So and also we have the same example in the top versus the bottom. What is the meaning of being a top with or a bottom? What is like those differences that make one or the other being seen by the society as something good or something bad? So it is very like important to understand these consequences. I'm going to give like the last example. I'm just going to translate for a bit. Entonces tenemos para identificar estas cosas una lectura social. En cuanto más nos alejamos de un modelo que tenemos que seguir, uno tiene más chances de sufrir mayores consecuencias por expresar eso que sentimos. Entonces, los dos ejemplos que estaba poniendo es, por ejemplo, los gays que son súper afeminados con los gays que no son afeminados. Entonces, claro, los gays que son súper afeminados pues van a tener mayores consecuencias, o por lo menos consecuencias más públicas, porque públicamente o digamos de una manera más frontal, pues agreden esas características que la sociedad implantó para, para que todos, digamos, las normas sociales que fueron implantadas, ¿sí? Entonces, cada vez que nos alejamos más de ese concepto, tenemos una tendencia a sufrir, digamos, manifestaciones más públicas o más frontales, digamos, de homofobia o transfobia. Okay, so I'm now going to follow. No, could you please go back one? Yes. So I'm going to take the example of a black lesbian woman, for example. This black lesbian woman will experience diversified racism for being a lesbian. Okay? So she is black, she will suffer racism, but this racism will not be the same racism that another black person will suffer. It will be diversified for being a lesbian. And in the same way, she will suffer lesbophobia, for example, for being of color. And this lesbophobia is different from uh, like another lesbian woman that is not black. Okay, and on top of all, she will pass through gender-based violence for being a woman as a whole. Like counterpointing, for example, a black gay man. Entonces estoy dando este ejemplo de una mujer negra lesbiana que va entonces a sufrir, si sufre racismo, va a sufrirlo de una manera diferente por ser lesbiana. O sea, una persona, por ejemplo, una persona negra va a sufrir racismo, pero en este caso, como ella, aparte de ser negra, tiene ese factor que también es lesbiana, entonces ese racismo va a ser diferente, al igual que la homofobia o la lesbofobia que va a sufrir ella por el hecho de ser de otra raza social, entonces también va a ser diversificada. Y encima de todo eso, va a tener también la violencia de género que tenemos en el día, por el simple hecho de ser mujer. Entonces, vemos cómo se articulan las cosas. Okay? So now we can move on. So, this is just basically to sum up what I just said. The manifestations will be analyzed differently in such a way that these racism and homophobia processes of that black lesbian woman will never be experienced in the same will never be experienced in the same way, neither by a white lesbian woman or a black straight one. And so on. We can have like lots of examples with this. We can have a gay cisgender man who's fat versus a gay cisgender white cisgender man who's not fat, who is muscular, and the difference that we will have in homophobia towards them, and the same with poor and rich. And for example, HIV status, it's very different to talk about, like, for example, an LGBT person that is living with HIV or not. And people have differentiated stigma, like an increased stigma for that. So, ok, entonces lo que está diciendo es que, resumiendo un poco lo que había dicho antes, las manifestaciones van a ser analizadas diferente, de manera que eh, una mujer lesbiana blanca o una mujer negra que es heterosexual nunca van a sentir este tipo de racismo o este tipo de lesbiofobia, ¿sí? Porque es diferente. So, just a reminder to end this slide, I'm not saying normative gays do not suffer homophobia. No estoy diciendo que los gays normativos no sufren homofobia. I'm just saying this homophobia will be different, will be in a different spectrum. So, estoy diciendo que esta homofobia va a ser en un espectro diferente, va a ser de una manera diferente. Okay? So, for example, here we have like a very interesting image. This is like I don't remember the exact name, of the artwork. But it is a famous image, like it really recalls the image of like the woman posting showing her guns, and this is like a very famous picture of feminism and female empowerment. Although we know, or we analyze of this, that there is only one type of women represented in the original painting. And this image is kind of like to diversify that all types of women should be empowered, not only and here, for example, we don't have, like, none of the three women that we see is actually like white. We have a Latina, a black woman, and an Arab woman. And this is also like calling for empowerment for everyone, independent of the other intersectional factors. So these are all different women in culture, different women in intersectional issues, but in the same time, they're all fighting for the same rights. Lo que estaba queriendo decir es que la imagen, claramente, pues de pronto ustedes saben en casa de dónde viene esta imagen. Esta imagen representa feminismo, pero en su imagen original es una mujer blanca, y aquí estamos representando otros tipos de mujeres que también luchan entonces por los mismos derechos. Sin embargo, no están representadas en la imagen original, y es para representar un poquito eso de interseccionalidad, de que entonces, por más de que tengamos características diferentes, vamos a luchar por los mismos derechos en la misma dirección. Okay. So the final message for this presentation. Next, please. First of all, I wanted to I put this slide to remind you to please ask your questions uh, in this YouTube comment and as a YouTube comment or in our questions and answers link that we sent you. So I am open to all of your comments. You know, if you want to discuss afterwards, it's all welcome. I'm really not an expert. It's just like things I really like to study, and that's it. Solo para recordarles entonces que hagan sus preguntas, la pueden hacer vía WhatsApp o con sus noras o también en este video en YouTube o también les compartimos un link para las preguntas y respuestas de Google Hangouts. Okay, so the final message is that as I showed you, LGBT phobia, because this is the actual, let's say, the most recent consensus of homophobia, you know, because before homophobia was talking about like LGBT phobia, I mean, all ways of hatred towards people who had diversified sexualities and gender identity. But now we speak about LGBT phobia because of that breakage, like within the LGBT population. So LGBT phobia is not homogeneous. This is the first message I want to leave you. It's not homogeneous. So, as I told you, nobody's responsible for being born in a certain situation. It's just about making an effort to not reproduce that same situation, that same system that led us to disrespect each other without even noticing. And I think the next paragraph I already spoke. If you already said it, so it's not like I'm going to focus on that. Entonces, lo que estaba diciendo es que la LGBT-fobia no es homogénea, ¿sí? Y es el primer mensaje que les quiero dejar. Decimos LGBTfobia porque es un término mucho más inclusivo. Hoy en día homofobia solo se refiere entonces a los crímenes o experiencias de odio que sufren los hombres gay. Y en este caso la LGBTfobia es mucho más abrangente en ese sentido. Entonces el mensaje es que, como les dije, nadie es responsable por nacer, digamos, de cierta manera o en una cierta situación, pero es hacer un esfuerzo para no reproducir ese sistema, para que sean evidentes las diferencias que tenemos uno con el otro y así poder mejorar, ya que así vamos a poder definitivamente luchar contra inigualdades en la sociedad. Okay, so next. Okay, so yeah, the real enemy are the homophobic people. I'm not saying if you're like a normative kind of person, you're like the devil or whatever. No, you also suffer homophobia, and but we need to recognize that we can also be our own enemies as well within the LGBT community, and this has happened very recently. And we need to fight rights as a whole. Like the image I showed you was like what it was representing. I'm sorry. It was representing is that we need to fight as a whole, and it's not because you are pro gay. I'm sorry, it was a typo. It's not that you are pro gay that you are anti hetero, or it's not because you are white that you cannot fight for black people's rights, or it's not because you have other types of characteristics that define you that you cannot fight for injustice in a social movement. Okay. Um, so we still need to fight the homophobic people, but we also need to change ourselves a bit in terms of we also have the duty to make this movement greater and to let it have more voice, and that the only way to getting into that is by recognizing that we need to go further together, you know, like so yeah. Ok, entonces sí, de hecho el enemigo real es la gente homofóbica, pero entonces nosotros también podemos ser nuestros propios enemigos dentro del movimiento LGBT. Y la razón por la que entonces intentamos luchar y evidenciar esto, la interseccionalidad, es porque necesitamos luchar por nuestros derechos en conjunto. Y pues escribí mal aquí, pero no es porque tú seas pro gay que tienes que ser anti hetero, o no es porque seas blanco que no puedas luchar por los derechos de la gente de color o diferentes culturas. Todo esto se suma en que tenemos que ser mucho más inclusivos entre nosotros para poder luchar juntos. Ok. So this is us. This is us in terms of we are composed of so many things, and we are an amazing web of magical, incredible characteristics and incredible, bits and pieces of sand that sum up a great beach, or I don't know how, like I'm getting poetic right now. The thing is that there is so many things that make up the composition of a human being that when we fight for our rights, we certainly sometimes do not take into consideration the sensibilities that attribute other types of characteristics in a person. And this is, I think, what this image represents. Entonces, estaba diciendo que estos somos nosotros, que tenemos muchos tipos de características que sumadas dan en lo que nosotros queremos y que identificar estas sensibilidades cuando luchamos por derechos de otras personas también es importante para ser lo más inclusivos posible. Okay. And this is like the final big word. Please put it in a bag and take it home. We need more empathy between each other to understand each other and to fight for different rights. And I think it's great, like to understand that empathy is actually, for me, it is almost like a vital sign. Empathy is a vital sign, I will say, because it really sees. I mean, of course, like vital signs in medicine can also mean like the heartbeat and the respiratory rate and all of these things. But empathy, I think, is a vital sign that we are human and that we are seeking for a better place. And I think I think that's it. Entonces les estaba diciendo que empatía para mí es un señal, es una señal, es un señal vital. Ay, no sé cómo se habla en español ahora. Eh, sí, es como decir no sé, el ritmo cardíaco o el ritmo respiratorio cuando decimos que una persona está pues bien o mal. Para mí la empatía es una señal de que somos humanos y de que estamos en conjunto creciendo y vamos para un lugar mejor. Next. And that's the end, guys. That's everything I had like to I don't know, like to say to you. I'm excited and I'm kind of like nervous because I prepared this like in the last 3 days, not exactly knowing if I was going to be able to like give and deliver everything I wanted to speak of, and if you guys were going to be able like to understand it the way I wanted to, at least. But of course, this is just like an open space to discuss, and we can also like debate on lots of other things that have to do with intersectionality. In terms of healthcare, of course, we have also summed up determinations to have access to healthcare with all of these characteristics that we mentioned. And I think basically this is it. I really wanted to thank you. I don't know, Jenna, if there are any questions.
So again, I'd like to invite everybody to ask questions if you have them. We have one question for you, Carlos, at this time. In your research or in your experience, have you come across different perceptions of what gay means across different cultures?
Yes, yes, I really like this question. Yes, thank you so much. Okay, so we saw in let's say in our first webinar about sexuality and gender identity that we have social determinations that may define what we are in a certain place or another. So of course, we've now like developed something that is called now like the gay culture, like for gay men, for example. And there's also the lesbian culture, and there's also the trans culture, and there's also So these cultures, let's say what we define as culture is kind of like those traditions or like behaviors that we accept as a group, and they reproduce like chronologically and also like socially through a long time. Okay, of course culture changes. For example, gays in Brazil are very different than gays in the United States. We can share things in common within a gay culture. For example, having a pop diva. I know that people like gays in the United States have pop divas, and here in Brazil we have pop divas as well. The difference is like, what will you do for a pop diva? Like, for example, people in the United States may hang banners in their, I don't know, like in their bedroom or not about like from their pop divas. People in Brazil may not, for example, because that is something that they developed in Brazil. You know, the cultures are different, although they are both like two different gay guys. Okay, of course, like I mean, you may be thinking like, yeah, like people in Brazil also have banners of pop divas in their rooms. Yes, they do, but I mean, I was just like making the example of there are different characteristics that we may probably like develop in a different way, um because of logistical, I'm sorry, like geographical positions, or as well social conditions. And this is also seen, for example, in gay clubs. For example, here in my city in Brazil, there is a gay club only for lesbians. For example, there's a gay club only for rich gay men. There's a gay club only for that accepts transgender like people. There's no transgender club, for example. And this is also like some signs of that gay like difference in gay culture that you may find in different countries. I don't know if I responded like the question right, but I think it goes like that.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you, Carlos. So we have no other questions at this time. If it's okay with you, we'll just give a couple of seconds to see if anybody wants to get a question in there before we end things off.
Sure, no problem.
Did you have anything that you wanted to say during that time? Anything else you wanted to bring up?
No, actually, I think it's very the thing about like being controversial with this topic is actually there's a lot of resistance like um within the LGBT community to speak about this, because many people like get sensible, you know, and I can understand that as well. Um but it is about like what I said, it is not about like blaming each other. It's just like recognizing that those differences exist, and that we also need to address, like for example, the system, or like I don't know, like social classes differences, all the types of gaps that we have independently of being gay or not, and like belonging to the community, to a certain gender identity or sexual orientation, and all of these things sum up. And recognizing this, I think, is a great step. You know, like Joe Cherevi, and like I'm going to quote him because he just like did an amazing space for the EMR region, just as we are doing right now. And he said like, be the advocate you want to see, and that is so like a mix of Mahatma Gandhi and IFMSA. You know, like it's basically that. You know, like we are really preaching for inclusion, and we are really preaching for like diversification within the world because of being gay or lesbian or queer gender or whatever. We also need to acknowledge that diversification carries along other topics, other characteristics, other intersectionalities. And like many people have like taken advantage of these intersectionalities, because now I also spoke about that like in the first webinar. But we have now pink money, for example, that is a whole industry only like specified and specialized in products for gay men, white cisgender gay men. So there's also like let's say now there's also like interest from the private companies that may be pharmacological, condoms, for example, that are targeting, a specific type of stereotype, a specific type of culture, and that prevents us from being more inclusive and to accept each other.
Great, thank you for your insight on that, Carlos. We have no other questions at this time, so I just want to remind everyone, if you do have further questions, feel free to post them in the comments below the YouTube video. And I just want to say thank you again to Carlos for your passion and knowledge on this topic really, really shines through. And I think that you deliver a phenomenal message. So
Thank you. I wanted to hear about you, Jenna. What do you think?
Oh, across cultures?
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely do come across it. I mean, I think that you brought up a lot of the points that were ringing true in my mind. I think just by virtue of kind of where I am, I get a cross-sectionality of kind of the colonial English cultures, the French cultures, and then the indigenous cultures of our area. And I can see many differences even between those three. With the, I'm not going to point out what one culture thinks over the other, but there are different perceptions. And I feel as though when it comes to the term gay or the term lesbian, many of those perceptions are physical, gendered perceptions that push one way or the other. So what would define, being gay in one culture very different than another. And I mean, that's just kind of in my own little bubble here as well. So I think you did a phenomenal job answering the question. And I mean, I have learned so much from you during this webinar. I'm sure.
No, but I really like that approach as well, because I didn't mention that, for example, that actually all of those like culture stereotypes are also biologically linked, that there definitely are. I totally agree with you, I think it's amazing. I don't know, like, I don't know if there's a specific like gay culture in Canada or something like that, but I think, well, in Brazil definitely there is, and it's very evident. Um, and I don't know what you think. I think there's not a problem with that, as long as we also recognize that there's still a gap.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that you touched on a really important point, I think, for North America in terms of the normative. And I think that from my experiences in North America, we do have very strong, very powerful, very loud subgroups in society. So like for instance, our gay male cisgendered society has a certain persona about it within kind of the public eye. And I mean, I've heard from just, people passing on the street or friends or so on and so forth, when they meet someone who doesn't fit that, the first reaction is, oh my gosh, I never would have guessed. And it's interesting that, that guessing is even happening. Why do we have to guess?
Yeah, totally, totally. So yeah, I think I think that's it. I don't know. I also was I was just, I'm sorry, like I was just thinking about also like what we say to bisexual people. Like, for example, yeah, that person must be, like confused, because it's almost impossible, to have a specific determination for someone who is everything or who likes everything, like, and it is not everything, because we still have non-binary people. But I mean, like, we're so enclosed in a such small box. um that also, like, these determinations are although they are constructed in such complexity, they are still reduced to a few, like, laws, a few behaviors, of the ones now that we now understand, at least.
Absolutely. And I think that it's interesting as well in the conversations that I hear. I mean, you hear about kind of bisexual and so on, but where does trans come into it, right? And I think that there are assumptions made about trans people that, all of a sudden they're considered gay, or all of a sudden, they're one way or the other. And it's just interesting, and it kind of feeds back to that oppression cycle that she mentioned earlier, and that kind of hierarchy. So anyway, I won't add any more.
No, but that's great. I think thank you so much, Jenna.
I want to say thank you so much. There are no other questions, so I'll hand it over to you to finish us off as you will. And again, much love. Thank you so much.
Okay, sure. So, guys, this is the end of the night. LACMA applications are coming up. Brrr, I'm nervous. No, I'm not. I'm really like excited to have you all in Ecuador this summer. Um, so keep posted on that. Keep being a strong score angel. And just a few reminders of tune up to our SCORA IDAHOT YouTube link next week. We are having more webinars. We are having special guests next week, which both Jenna and I adore. So you cannot miss them by any chance. I'm telling you, it's going to be great. Okay, so have a really good night. I love you tons. Okay, and see you.